The winter wind howled through the ancient pines of the Canadian wilderness, carrying with it the bitter cold that could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Colt Rains tightened the straps on his thermal jacket, his trained eyes scanning the horizon. 20 years as a combat medic in global conflict zones had taught him to read landscapes for threats and opportunities. Now, as the leader of an elite survival camp, he used those same skills to teach others how to thrive in Earth's most unforgiving environments. "Wind's picking up," he muttered to himself, watching as his breath crystallized in the frigid air. Storm front moving in faster than predicted. The year was 2157, and Earth had undergone dramatic changes. First contact with extraterrestrial civilizations had occurred 30 years prior, opening humanity to the vast cosmic community. Some alien races came as traders, others as diplomats, and a few as refugees from interstellar conflicts too complex for humans to fully comprehend. Colt, like many humans of his generation, had grown accustomed to seeing non-terrestrial beings in major cities, but rarely here in the wilderness he called home. He adjusted the neural interface at his temple, standard military hardware that connected him to the camp's security systems. The small group of survivalists he was training had turned in for the night, seeking refuge in their thermal shelters from the approaching storm. Colt preferred to make one final sweep of the perimeter, a habit from his military days that had saved lives more than once. That's when he saw it. A streak of blue-white light cutting across the night sky at a sharp, unnatural angle. Not a meteor. The trajectory was too controlled, too deliberate, until it suddenly wasn't. The light faltered, sputtered, and then plummeted toward the forest approximately 2 miles north of the camp. "Jake, Emma." Colt spoke into his neural interface, contacting his 2 senior staff members. "I've got a situation. Possible crash. I'm going to investigate." "Want backup?" Jake's voice crackled in his ear. "Negative. Stay with the group. If I'm not back by dawn, follow Emergency Protocol Alpha." Colt gathered his advanced medkit and emergency survival gear. Whatever had fallen from the sky, whether terrestrial or otherwise, there might be survivors who needed help. The storm would kill them long before any official rescue could arrive. The trek through the densening snowfall was arduous. Colt's thermal imaging visor helped him navigate the treacherous terrain as the temperature continued to drop. The impact site revealed itself as a ghostly glow through the trees, unnaturally bright against the darkness of the forest. What he found wasn't a standard escape pod or emergency vessel. The craft was elegant despite its damaged state, constructed of materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Symbols etched into its surface pulsed with bioluminescent light. Zarathi script. He recognized from his briefings during the Proxima Centauri diplomatic mission years ago. A section of the craft had been torn open, leaving a jagged wound in its otherwise seamless hull. Steam rose where hot metal met snow, creating an eerie fog around the crash site. Colt approached cautiously, weapon drawn more from habit than intent. The Zarathi were not known to be hostile, but any injured being could be dangerous. He found her half buried in snow several yards from the craft, a trail of iridescent blue fluid, Zarathi blood, marking her desperate crawl away from the wreckage. Even in the dim light, the royal insignia on her damaged armor was unmistakable. This wasn't just any Zarathi. This was nobility. She lay face down, her skin a pale lavender hue that had begun to darken at the extremities, a dangerous sign for her species. Zarathi were susceptible to extreme cold, despite their advanced physiology. Colt holstered his weapon and knelt beside her, activating his medical scanner. "Can you hear me?" he asked, gently turning her over. Her eyes fluttered open, solid amethyst with no discernible pupils, yet somehow expressing profound confusion and fear. The neural patterns on her exposed skin flickered weakly, a Zarathi equivalent to a failing pulse. "I need to get you warm," Colt said. unsure if she understood Earth languages. "I'm going to help you." To his surprise, she responded in perfect, though accented, English. "Leave me," she whispered, her voice melodic despite its weakness. "I am disgraced." "You're hypothermic and bleeding," Colt countered, already applying emergency thermal wraps to her core and preparing a biogenic stabilizer from his kit. "Disgrace isn't fatal. This cold is—" A weak laugh escaped her blue-tinged lips. "You don't understand. Human. I am Rhea, third princess of the Zarathi sovereign stars. I have been exiled for weakness, left to die. It is our way." Colt had encountered many cultural practices during his time as a military medic. Some he respected, others he found barbaric, but his oath remained the same regardless. "Well, Princess," he said as he lifted her surprisingly light form into his arms. "You're in my forest now, and in my forest, we don't let people die if we can help it. Your way will have to wait." Her eyes widened at his insolence, but she lacked the strength to protest further. The neural pathways across her skin pulsed once brightly, whether in anger or surrender. Colt couldn't tell, before she slipped into unconsciousness. The storm hit with full force as Colt made his way back to camp. The princess cradled against his chest. Each step became a battle against the howling wind and blinding snow. His neural interface struggled to maintain a stable connection through the electromagnetic interference of the blizzard. "Jake, Emma," he called out when the system briefly connected. "Prepare the medical pod. I'm bringing in a survivor, Zarathi royalty." Only static answered him, but he knew the message had gotten through. By the time he stumbled into the camp's central dome, Jake and Emma had the advanced medical unit ready. They stared wide-eyed at the alien princess as Colt gently placed her on the biobed. "Everyone else still asleep?" Colt asked, as he began removing the princess's damaged armor to assess her wounds. Emma nodded, her eyes never leaving the Zarathi's face. "We thought it best not to wake them. Fewer complications." "Good call," Colt agreed. "This situation is delicate enough without 20 civilians asking questions." The medical scanner hummed as it passed over Rhea's body, displaying her alien physiology in holographic detail above the biobed. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe hypothermia, and a concerning neural disruption in her central cortex, the Zarathi equivalent of a concussion. "Can we even treat her?" Jake asked, eyeing the unfamiliar anatomy displayed in the hologram. "Their biology is—" "Similar enough," Colt interrupted, already programming the nanite injectors. "I served as liaison medic during the Proxima negotiations. Had to study their physiology. The basics are the same. Stop the bleeding, stabilize temperature, support neural function." As he worked, Colt couldn't help but wonder what weakness had condemned this princess to exile. The Zarathi were known throughout the galaxy as warriors and conquerors, their empire expanding through both military might and technological superiority. Yet they were also respected for their strict code of honor and their contributions to interstellar medicine. To exile royalty was unprecedented. Hours passed before Rhea's condition stabilized. The neural patterns across her skin had strengthened from a dim flicker to a steady pulse, and her lavender complexion had deepened to a healthier hue. Colt dismissed Jake and Emma to get some rest, promising to alert them if anything changed. Alone with the unconscious princess, Colt settled into a chair beside the biobed. The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the dome's reinforced walls. He studied Rhea's face, noting the delicate ridge of cartilage, where a human would have eyebrows, and the subtle, almost invisible scales that covered her skin like a fine sheen. "What did you do, princess?" he murmured. "What weakness is worth dying for?" As if in response to his voice, Rhea's eyes slowly opened. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling in confusion before her gaze settled on Colt. "You defied my wishes," she said softly, her voice stronger than before. "I did," Colt acknowledged without apology. "How are you feeling?" She seemed to consider the question, her hand rising to touch the medical sensors attached to her temple. "Functioning adequately. You have medical knowledge of my species. Enough to keep you alive," he confirmed. "The nanites have repaired the worst of the internal damage. Your ribs will be sore for a few days, and you should avoid strenuous activity until your neural pathways fully stabilize." Rhea attempted to sit up, wincing as her healing ribs protested. Colt moved to assist her, but she raised a hand to stop him. "I must do this myself," she insisted. "Dependency is weakness." Colt stepped back, watching as she slowly, painfully pushed herself upright. Her determination was evident in the tightening of her jaw and the intensification of the neural patterns across her exposed skin. "You mentioned exile," Colt said once she had settled. "Mind telling me what that's about? Might be relevant to your treatment." Rhea's expression hardened. "It is not a medical concern. It is a matter of honor." "Honor that got you half dead in a blizzard," Colt pointed out. "Sounds like a medical concern to me." A flash of anger crossed her features, the neural patterns on her neck pulsing rapidly. "You speak with unusual boldness for a human addressing Zarathi royalty. Former royalty, according to you," Colt countered. "And I've treated enough dignitaries and warlords to know that under the fancy titles, we all bleed when we're cut. So, exile. What happened?" For a long moment, Rhea remained silent, her amethyst eyes studying him intensely. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a weight of shame that transcended species. "I refuse to kill," she said simply. Colt waited for more, but she offered nothing further. "That's it?" he finally asked. "You refused to kill someone, and they exiled you for it?" "Not someone," Rhea clarified. "An enemy combatant who had been captured during our campaign to subdue a rebellious system. As a member of the royal house, I was given the honor of executing the prisoner to demonstrate the consequence of defying Zarathi rule." "And you refused," Colt finished for her. Rhea nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I suggested imprisonment instead. Rehabilitation. The possibility of eventual reintegration." Her voice hardened. "The High Command saw this as unacceptable weakness, a flaw in my character that made me unfit for my position. So they stripped your title and dropped you on a random planet to die?" Colt couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Not random," Rhea corrected. "Earth was chosen specifically because of its primitive conditions and isolation from major interstellar routes. And it was not immediate death they sought for me, but a test. If I possess true strength, I will survive. If not—" She shrugged, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "Then my exile becomes execution, and my name is struck from the Imperial records." Colt processed this information, trying to reconcile it with what he knew of Zarathi culture. "Where I come from, showing mercy isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the harder choice." "An interesting perspective," Rhea said, though her tone suggested she found it naive rather than compelling. "Yet it does not change my reality. I am here until I either prove my strength or die trying." "Well," Colt said, standing and checking her vital signs on the monitor. "You won't be doing either tonight. You need rest. We can figure out the next steps in the morning." Rhea didn't argue, which told Colt more about her exhaustion than any medical scan could. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Human, Colt, why did you save me?" He looked back at her, considering his answer carefully. "Because that's what strength means to me. Not letting death win when I can fight it." The neural patterns across her skin pulsed once, slowly, as she absorbed his words. "Rest," he repeated, and left her to contemplate the strange human concept of strength that had saved her life. The next morning brought clear skies and biting cold. Colt arranged for Jake and Emma to take the survival trainees on an extended expedition, citing a special research project that required privacy. Once they had departed, he returned to the medical dome to check on his patient. He found Rhea standing by the dome's transparent section, gazing out at the snow-covered forest. She had fashioned her medical blanket into a makeshift robe that preserved her dignity while allowing the neural patterns on her neck and arms to remain exposed to the air, a physiological necessity for her species. "You should be resting," Colt said as he entered. "I have rested sufficiently," she replied without turning. "Your world is harsh, yet beautiful. It reminds me of the winter ceremonial grounds on Zarathi Prime." Colt moved to stand beside her, following her gaze to the glistening landscape. "How are the ribs?" "Healing," she said simply. Then, after a pause, "I must learn to survive here. Will you teach me?" The request surprised him. "You're not planning to contact your people. I assume you have some way to signal for extraction once you've proven your strength." Rhea turned to face him, her expression solemn. "My exile is not a simple banishment, Colt Rains. It is a spiritual journey. I must find my true strength before I can return. If I can return." The crash. She hesitated. "The crash was not an accident. It was engineered as part of my trial." "They sabotaged your ship?" Colt asked incredulously. "They presented me with a vessel they knew would fail upon atmospheric entry," she clarified. "My first test was surviving the crash itself." Colt shook his head in disbelief. "That's not a test, that's attempted murder." "It is our way," Rhea insisted, though something in her voice suggested uncertainty. "Each member of the royal house must prove their worthiness through trials appropriate to their station. Mine is to survive, and eventually signal when I have found the strength I lack." "And if I hadn't found you?" "Then I would have been proven unworthy." She stated this as simple fact, but Colt could see the neural patterns on her neck pulsing faster, the Zarathi equivalent of elevated heart rate. "All right," he said after a moment. "I'll teach you what you need to know to survive here, but I have conditions." Rhea raised her chin slightly. "Name them." "First, you follow my instructions exactly. Earth's wilderness doesn't care about royal protocol. One mistake can kill you. Second, when you're healed enough, you contribute to the camp. Everyone works. Everyone helps. Third," he paused, making sure she was listening carefully, "you keep an open mind about what strength really means. Your people's definition nearly got you killed last night." She considered his terms, her head tilting slightly, in a gesture he recognized as contemplation among her species. "Acceptable," she finally said. "When do we begin?" "Now," Colt replied, moving to a storage unit and retrieving Earth-appropriate cold weather gear. "First lesson, proper insulation. Your Zarathi physiology isn't adapted to these temperatures." Over the next week, Colt taught Rhea the fundamentals of Earth survival. She proved to be an apt pupil, approaching each lesson with the disciplined focus of someone trained from birth for leadership. She learned to dress in layers, to recognize safe paths through the snow, to identify edible plants that survived the winter. Fire-making fascinated her. The Zarathi had long since evolved beyond such primitive technologies, and watching the flames spring to life from her own efforts seemed to awaken something primal in her alien consciousness. "We have stories," she told Colt, as they sat beside the small fire she had successfully built. "Ancient legends from before space travel, of how our ancestors stole fire from the sky spirits. I never understood the significance until now." She extended her hands toward the warmth, the neural patterns across her skin reflecting the dancing flames. "There is power in creation, isn't there?" Colt nodded, watching her face in the firelight. "Different kind of power than destruction. Harder to master, sometimes." "Yes," she agreed softly. "Much harder." As her strength returned, Colt expanded her training to include fishing through ice, constructing emergency shelters, and tracking game. She approached each task with determination, though her royal upbringing occasionally showed through in moments of frustration or pride. "This is inefficient," she complained one afternoon as they attempted to catch fish through a hole in the frozen lake. "On Zarathi Prime, we would simply use sonic pulses to stun entire schools. And if you had sonic technology here, that would be helpful," Colt replied patiently. "But you don't. You have a stick and a line, so you adapt." She fell silent, focusing intently on the task until, hours later, she pulled a modest-sized trout from the ice. The look of triumph on her face was worth all the complaints. "I have provided sustenance," she announced proudly, holding the fish aloft. "You have," Colt agreed, hiding his amusement at her formality. "Now you'll learn to prepare it." The lessons weren't one-sided. In the evenings, Rhea taught Colt about Zarathi culture and history, answering his questions about her people's advancement and philosophy. Slowly, he began to understand the rigid honor code that had shaped her, the unyielding expectations placed upon royal offspring, and the militaristic society that equated mercy with weakness. "Our expansion across the stars has been necessary," she explained one night as they shared a meal in Colt's cabin. "Resources dwindle, populations grow. The strong survive by ensuring their access to what they need." "At the expense of others," Colt pointed out. "Yes," she acknowledged without hesitation. "It is the natural order." "So why didn't you kill that prisoner?" he asked bluntly. "If you believe in this natural order, what stopped you?" The neural patterns across her exposed neck dimmed momentarily, a sign of deep emotion among her kind. "I looked into his eyes," she said quietly. "He had fought honorably to protect his world. He had family. Killing him would have solved nothing, changed nothing, except to extinguish something valuable from the universe." She looked up at Colt. "I could not do it. And in that moment of refusal, I became weak in the eyes of my people." "Sounds like strength to me," Colt said. "Standing up for what you believe is right, even when everyone around you disagrees, especially then." Rhea smiled faintly, the expression still somewhat unnatural on her alien features. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply lacked the resolve required of a true Zarathi royal." "Tell me about the signal," Colt said, changing the subject. "The one you'll send when you've found your strength. How does that work?" "I carry a quantum beacon," she explained, touching a small, crystalline device partially embedded in her collarbone. "When activated, it will transmit my location across vast distances instantly. A retrieval team will be dispatched." "And who decides when you've proven yourself? When the test is passed?" "I do," she said simply. "That is part of the trial. To activate the beacon prematurely, to call for rescue without having truly changed, would bring greater disgrace than exile." Colt studied her face, seeing the conflict behind her composed expression. "And have you changed? I mean..." Before she could answer, a piercing alarm sounded from Colt's neural interface. He jumped to his feet, accessing the security feed. "Proximity alert," he explained tersely. "Something just entered our perimeter." They moved quickly to the dome's monitoring station. The thermal imaging showed a figure moving through the forest with the careful precision of military training. The shape was unmistakably Zarathi. "A scout," Rhea whispered, her neural patterns pulsing rapidly with alarm. "They're checking on me." "I thought you said they wouldn't come until you signaled," Colt said, already reaching for his weapon. "They wouldn't extract me," she clarified. "But periodic observation would be part of the trial, to ensure I am truly tested." Her voice hardened. "And to eliminate me if I sought outside help." Colt processed this new information quickly. "Will they consider me outside help?" "Yes," she confirmed, fear evident in her voice despite her attempt to control it. "Initial survival assistance might be overlooked, but ongoing aid from a native? It would invalidate my trial entirely." "Then we need to get you out of sight," Colt decided, closing the security feed. "There's a concealed shelter near the eastern ridge. We use it for extreme weather conditions.
No, Rhea said firmly. I will not hide. If they discover you've been helping me, and they will, they're thorough, they'll kill you as interference. I must face this scout alone. Convince them I am surviving independently.
That's suicide, Colt argued. You're not fully healed, and you've only had basic survival training.
It is the only way,
she insisted. Trust me, Colt.
I know my people.
Reluctantly, Colt agreed to her plan. They quickly gathered appropriate survival gear to support her story of independent living. Rhea changed into the cold weather clothing they had modified for her physiology and armed herself with the basic tools Colt had taught her to use. Stay out of sight, she instructed him as she prepared to leave. Their sensors can detect human life signs, but the interference from the mineral deposits in the eastern caves should mask your presence if you go deep enough. Colt caught her arm as she turned to go. Rhea, be careful. She covered his hand with hers, the neural patterns on her skin pulsing once, strongly. I will return. This I promise you. He watched her disappear into the forest, moving with the newfound confidence of someone who had learned to navigate the harsh environment. Despite his concerns, pride mingled with his worry. She had come far in a short time. Colt retreated to the caves as instructed, but he couldn't simply hide and wait. Using his neural interface, he maintained surveillance of the area through the camp's security system. He watched as Rhea intercepted the Zarathi scout at the edge of a small clearing. The scout was tall, even for a Zarathi, clad in adaptive armor that seemed to absorb the very shadows around it. The neural patterns visible on the scout's exposed face pulsed with surprise at Rhea's approach. Princess, the scout's voice carried through Colt's surveillance audio. You live.
I do. Kess, Rhea replied, and Colt was struck by the authority that had returned to her voice. This was not the injured, uncertain exile he had found in the snow, but a royal addressing a subject. Your surprise suggests you expected otherwise. The crash was severe. The scout, Kess, responded carefully. Many would not have survived. I am not many, Rhea stated. I am Zarathi royal blood. Report my status to the High Command. I continue my trial. Kess studied her, head tilting in that characteristic Zarathi gesture of assessment. You appear to be utilizing native technology and techniques. Interesting adaptation. One uses what is available, Rhea said dismissively. The strong adapt. Is that not our teaching? Indeed, Kess agreed, though something in his tone suggested skepticism. And have you found it? The strength you lacked when you refused to execute the prisoner? Rhea's neural patterns flashed once, betraying emotion before steadying. My journey continues. That is all you need report. As you wish. Princess. Kess inclined his head slightly, not quite a bow, but an acknowledgement of her status despite her exile. The next observation will come without warning. Be prepared to demonstrate your progress more thoroughly. With that ominous statement, the scout activated a cloaking device and disappeared into the forest. Colt waited until his sensors confirmed the Zarathi had left the area before emerging from his hiding place and returning to camp. He found Rhea in the central dome, her composed facade crumbling now that she was alone. She paced the room, the neural patterns across her skin flashing erratically with distress. You handled that well, Colt said as he entered. She turned to him, eyes wide. It was Kess, a warrior I trained with since childhood. He didn't expect to find me alive. Colt, the crash was meant to kill me. You suspected as much before, Colt reminded her gently. Suspicion is different from confirmation, she said, her voice tight. And his warning about the next observation. They will send someone to truly test me. Not just observe, but challenge. Perhaps even attack. Colt absorbed this information grimly. Then we need to accelerate your training. How long do you think we have?
Days, perhaps weeks at most, she said. They will not wait long enough for me to become too comfortable here. Then we start tomorrow, Colt decided. Not just survival skills, but combat tactics specific to this environment. You know their strengths and weaknesses better than I do. We'll use that. Rhea nodded, visibly pulling herself together. Yes. I can do this. I must. We can do this, Colt corrected her. You're not alone, Rhea. She looked at him, her alien features softening into an expression he was learning to recognize as affection. No, she agreed quietly. I am not alone. Perhaps that is what truly frightens them. The following days took on a new intensity. Colt pushed Rhea harder, teaching her to use the environment as both weapon and shield. They practiced guerrilla tactics, utilizing the natural features of the landscape to create advantages against technologically superior opponents. Your people rely heavily on their advanced technology, Colt explained, as they set rudimentary traps in the forest. That's their weakness here. Earth's magnetic field interferes with some of their more sophisticated systems. Use that. Rhea proved to be a quick study, her royal military training providing a solid foundation that Colt built upon with his Earth-specific knowledge. She learned to move silently through snow, to use ice and water as defensive barriers, to create distractions that would confuse Zarathi sensors. As they worked together, something shifted between them. The line between teacher and student blurred as they began to function as partners, each contributing their unique knowledge to create strategies neither could have developed alone. One evening, as they sat reviewing the day's progress, Rhea asked a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. If they come in force, Colt, what will you do? He looked up from the map they had been studying. What do you mean? My people, she clarified. If they determine I've had help, if they come not just to test me but to eliminate interference, will you fight them? Colt considered the question carefully. I've been in enough wars to know when one is worth fighting. Protecting someone who deserves protection? That's always worth it. Even against superior forces? Even when victory is unlikely? Especially then, he said firmly. That's what real strength is, Rhea. Not winning every fight, but choosing the right ones to fight, regardless of the odds. She was silent for a long moment, the neural patterns on her skin pulsing slowly, thoughtfully. On my world, we have a concept called Karithi, the worthy defeat. It is considered more honorable to fall fighting for a true cause than to triumph in a hollow one. We have similar ideas here, Colt said. Different words, same concept. Perhaps our species are not so different at their core, Rhea mused. Before Colt could respond, a brilliant light flashed outside, illuminating the dome with blinding intensity. They rushed to the window to see a Zarathi ship descending through the clouds. Not a small scout vessel, but a military transport. They're early, Rhea whispered, her voice tight with fear. Too early. I'm not ready. Colt activated his neural interface, scanning the approaching ship. Multiple life signs. At least a dozen Zarathi soldiers. He turned to her. Decision made. We need to move, now. The eastern caves. No, Rhea interrupted, her posture straightening as resolution replaced fear. Running would prove them right about my weakness. I must face this. Rhea, that's not a test. That's an execution squad. Perhaps, she acknowledged. Or perhaps it is my true trial. The moment I must demonstrate what strength really means. She met his gaze steadily. Will you stand with me, Colt Rains? Not hiding, not running, but facing whatever comes together. Looking into her eyes, Colt saw something beyond the alien physiology, beyond the royal training and cultural differences. He saw courage in its purest form, the courage to face impossible odds for what one believes is right. Together, he agreed. They prepared quickly, gathering only essential weapons and supplies. As the Zarathi ship landed in the clearing near the camp, They positioned themselves at the edge of the forest, visible but not vulnerable, making it clear they were neither hiding nor attacking. The ship's ramp descended, and armored figures emerged. At their head walked a tall Zarathi male, whose elaborate armor and extensively illuminated neural patterns marked him as high-ranking military. "Commander Thane," Rhea murmured to Colt, "High General of the Zarathi fleet, my mother's most trusted military advisor." Thane approached with measured steps, his escort of soldiers fanning out in tactical formation. He stopped several yards away, studying Rhea with an unreadable expression. "Third Princess," he said formally, "you continue to surprise us with your persistence." "Commander," Rhea acknowledged with equal formality, "your arrival is unexpected. I have not activated the beacon." "The High Council determined that additional assessment was warranted," Thane replied smoothly. His gaze shifted to Colt. "Particularly in light of reports that you may have received unauthorized assistance." Rhea stepped forward, subtly positioning herself between Thane and Colt. "I have learned from this world and its inhabitants, as any Zarathi would. Adaptation is strength, is it not? Learning is permitted," Thane conceded. "Dependency is not." His neural patterns flashed in a pattern Colt recognized as challenge. "You must prove you have found true strength, Princess, not simply borrowed another's." "And how am I to demonstrate this?" Rhea asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Thane gestured, and two soldiers brought forward a struggling figure, a young Zarathi male in civilian clothing. "This traitor was captured providing information to enemies of the Empire. The High Council has granted you an opportunity to rectify your previous failure. Execute him, here and now, and your exile will end. You may return to your rightful place." The neural patterns across Rhea's skin flashed with shock, then steadied into a controlled pulse. Colt tensed beside her, his hand moving subtly toward his weapon. "No," she said quietly to him. "This is my trial." She stepped forward, approaching the prisoner, who had been forced to his knees before her. Thane presented her with a ceremonial blade, the traditional instrument of Zarathi execution. Colt watched, heart pounding, as Rhea accepted the weapon. Had their time together meant nothing? Would she revert to Zarathi traditions to save herself? Rhea stood before the prisoner, blade in hand. The neural patterns across her skin pulsed, with an intensity Colt had never witnessed before. When she spoke, her voice carried across the clearing with surprising power. "I see the trap you've laid, Commander. If I kill this man, I betray the principle that led to my exile. If I refuse, you label me weak and unworthy, yet again." She turned to face Thane directly. "But there is another option you have not considered." With deliberate slowness, she knelt before the prisoner. Thane's neural patterns flashed with confusion, and the soldiers shifted uncomfortably. This was not in the script they had anticipated. "What are you doing?" Thane demanded. "Demonstrating true strength," Rhea replied. She placed the blade on the ground, and instead reached out to touch the prisoner's temple, where his neural patterns pulsed with fear. Colt recognized the gesture, a Zarathi healing touch, a technique used to stabilize neural pathways in times of extreme distress. It was an intimate act of compassion, rarely performed outside family bonds. "You are Zarathi," she said to the prisoner, her voice gentle, yet carrying to all present. "As am I. We share the same stars, the same ancestors, the same future. Your actions may have opposed the Empire's current path, but they came from conviction, not malice." The prisoner's neural patterns began to synchronize with hers, a physiological response that couldn't be faked. Thane stepped forward in alarm. "Princess, cease this immediately. This is not the demonstration required." Rhea ignored him, continuing the neural connection with the prisoner. "I see your fear. I see your courage in acting on your beliefs despite that fear. There is no weakness in this." Something extraordinary began to happen. The neural patterns across Ria's skin brightened, pulsing with increasing luminosity until they seemed to glow from within. The prisoner's patterns responded, matching her rhythm. And then, like a wave spreading outward, the patterns of the nearest soldiers began to pulse in synchrony as well. "What is happening?" one of the soldiers gasped, looking down at his own illuminated skin in confusion. "Neural resonance," Colt realized aloud. "She's creating a shared connection." Tane drew his weapon, pointing it at Rhea. "Stop this immediately. This is forbidden technique." "It is forgotten technique," Rhea corrected, her voice eerily calm as the resonance continued to spread. "From before the Imperial expansion, when our people used neural connection to heal, not to dominate. When strength meant unity, not conquest. More soldiers were being drawn into the resonance, their neural patterns synchronizing despite their obvious attempts to resist. Even Thane's patterns had begun to flicker in response, though he fought against it with visible effort. "This is the strength I lacked. Commander," Rhea continued, rising to her feet while maintaining the connection. "Not the courage to kill, but the courage to heal, to connect rather than divide, to see beyond our doctrine of isolation and superiority to the truth of our interconnected existence." The resonance had now encompassed all the Zarathi present, creating a pulsing web of light that connected them visibly through their neural patterns. Colt stood witness, understanding that he was observing something profound and ancient, a biological capacity for empathy that the Zarathi military culture had suppressed. "You will cease this immediately," Thane commanded, though his voice lacked conviction as the resonance affected his neural system. "This is treason against the Empire." "No," Rhea countered. "This is loyalty to something greater than Empire, to life itself." She stepped toward him, unwavering. "You came to witness my strength, Commander. Behold it." She reached out and touched Thane's temple directly, intensifying the connection between them. The commander's weapon wavered, then lowered, as his neural patterns synchronized fully with hers. For a moment, they stood frozen in that position, princess and commander, exile and enforcer, connected in a way that transcended their societal roles. When Thane finally spoke, his voice had changed, becoming quieter, less certain. "I see your thoughts, your experiences here." He looked around at the Earth wilderness, then at Colt, as if seeing them truly for the first time. "You believe this connection is strength?" "I know it is," Rhea affirmed. "Greater than any weapon or conquest. The ability to understand one another, to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy." Slowly, Thane turned to his soldiers, who stood transfixed by the neural resonance still flowing between them. "Stand down," he ordered. "Release the prisoner." The soldiers obeyed without question, their movements fluid and coordinated in a way that went beyond military discipline. The prisoner rose, looking to Rhea with an expression of profound gratitude. "What will you tell the High Council?" Rhea asked Thane. The commander considered for a long moment before answering. "The truth, that you have indeed found strength, one our people have forgotten, whether they will recognize it as such." He left the sentence unfinished. "They will," Rhea said with conviction. "Because you will show them, as I have shown you. The resonance leaves an imprint, Commander. You will carry it with you, and it will spread." Thane nodded slowly, the neural patterns across his skin still pulsing in harmony with hers, though with decreasing intensity as the resonance naturally faded. "And you, Princess? Will you return to stand before the council?" Rhea looked at Colt, something unspoken passing between them. "I will return," she confirmed. "But not yet. My work here is unfinished. There is much our people can learn from Earth and its inhabitants. Much I still need to understand. Then I will report that your trial continues," Thane decided. "With the Council's permission, I will return in 6 cycles to reassess your progress." "And the prisoner?" Rhea asked. "Will return with us for proper hearing, not execution," Thine assured her. "Your demonstration has made certain perspectives clearer." With formal salutes, the Zarathi soldiers retreated to their ship, taking the pardoned prisoner with them. As the vessel rose into the sky, Colt turned to Rhea in amazement. "What exactly did you do back there?" The neural patterns across her skin had returned to their normal pulse, though they seemed somehow brighter than before. "I accessed an ancient ability our military training teaches us to suppress. Neural resonance. The capacity to connect directly with the emotional and mental states of others through our neural pathways." "Mind reading?" Colt asked skeptically. "More like mind sharing," Rhea clarified. "Not thoughts themselves, but the emotional context behind them, the personal truth of experience. It was once the foundation of our society, before imperial expansion prioritized isolation and dominance. And you learned this. How?" A small smile touched her lips. "From you, in a way. Your insistence that true strength lies in connection, not separation. In building, not destroying. It awakened memories of teachings I received as a child, before military training. Old stories about the connected ones who led our people in ancient times." Colt shook his head in wonder. "Will it last? The effect on Tyne and the others?" "The direct resonance will fade," Rhea acknowledged. "But the experience leaves a permanent impression. They have felt connection again, after generations of trained isolation. That is not easily forgotten." She looked up at the sky where the ship had disappeared. "It is a beginning, not an end." "And what about you?" Colt asked, the question laden with unspoken meaning. "When Thane returns in 6 cycles, however long that is, will you go with him?" Rhea turned to face him fully, the neural patterns on her skin pulsing in a rhythm he was beginning to recognize as uniquely hers. "I meant what I said. There is still much I need to learn here." Her voice softened. "Much I need to understand about strength, about connection, about us." The word hung between them, filled with possibility. "Us," Colt repeated thoughtfully. "That's a complicated concept between a human survival expert and an exiled alien princess." "Complexity is not weakness," Rhea said, echoing one of his own lessons back to him. "Sometimes, it is the greatest strength of all." As they walked back toward the camp together, the setting sun painted the snow-covered forest in hues of gold and crimson. Neither spoke for a time, each contemplating the path that had brought them together and the uncertain future ahead. "You know," Colt finally said, "I'm pretty sure this violates about a dozen interspecies diplomatic protocols." Rhea's laugh, a sound she had only recently discovered, rang out across the winter landscape. "Then we shall be pioneers. Colt reigns, breaking new ground. Is that not what explorers do?" "It is," he agreed, smiling. "It absolutely is." 6 months later, Colt and Rhea stood on the observation platform of the newly established Earth Zarathi Transition Embassy. Below them stretched the dramatic landscape of the Canadian wilderness, now home to the first permanent Zarathi settlement on Earth. The building itself was a marvel of combined technologies, Earth's sustainable materials integrated with Zarathi bioarchitectural techniques. "The Council's delegation arrives tomorrow," Rhea said, her gaze on the horizon where the sun was setting in spectacular fashion. "My mother among them." "Nervous?" Colt asked, noting the rapid pulse of the neural patterns visible at her temple. "Appropriately concerned," she corrected with the hint of a smile. "Empress Vex is not known for her adaptability. This transition represents significant change for our people." Since Thane's return to Zarathi Prime, with news of Rhea's demonstration, a quiet revolution had been unfolding within the Empire. The neural resonance technique had spread among the military ranks first, then to the civilian population. Ancient practices of connection were being rediscovered, challenging centuries of imperial doctrine based on isolation and conquest. The preliminary agreements are solid, Colt reassured her, gesturing to the settlement below. Your people need new approaches to expansion, and Earth needs advanced medical technology. It's a fair exchange. It is more than exchange, Rhea said softly. It is alliance, partnership, concepts my people have forgotten in their quest for dominance. Colt took her hand, his human fingers intertwining with her alien ones. The neural patterns on her skin responded to his touch, pulsing in harmony with his biorhythms. A connection they had discovered worked across species boundaries. Your mother will see what you've accomplished here, he said. The strength it took to forge this path. Our path, Rhea corrected him. I would not have found this strength without you. Colt Rains. You always had it, he countered. You just needed someone to see it. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the settlement's lights come on against the gathering dusk. What had begun as one princess's exile had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. The foundation for a new kind of interstellar relationship based on mutual respect rather than dominance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new possibilities. The Empress would arrive with her retinue, prepared to formalize the alliance Rhea and Colt had initiated. There would be ceremonies binding not just two worlds, but two hearts that had found strength in the most unexpected of places. Do you ever regret it? Rhea asked suddenly. Saving me that night? Knowing where it would lead? Colt turned to her, taking in the graceful alien features that had become so dear to him. Not for a second, he said truthfully. Some paths are worth every step, no matter how difficult. The neural patterns across her skin brightened in response, pulsing with an emotion that needed no translation across the stars that separated their origins. In that moment, as darkness fell across the Canadian wilderness and lights twinkled in the settlement below, they stood as living proof that true strength often came in forms neither of their worlds had fully understood before, in connection, in compassion, and in the courage to forge new paths together.